How many slides do we have?
We have 3.
Thank you. All right, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We are back in session for Council Bill 22-0235, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. I'm Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, and Councilman Isaac Gitze Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. We're also joined by Nina Themlis on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott, as well as Matt Stegman and Nate Poole on behalf of Council President Nick Mosby. Joining me to my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. Inspector General Cumming, we are here for the Office of the Inspector General budget hearing. I understand you have 3 slides. I'm going to ask you to keep your presentation to no more than 10 minutes. I will remind you as we approach that 10-minute mark. We've also been joined by Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. Madam Inspector General, before you begin, please introduce your staff that you have with you, full name and position title, and then please take it away. Thank you.
Okay.
Please, sorry, it's for everyone. Please be sure to speak into the mic. Folks at home that are watching won't be able to hear you. When you're speaking into the mic, you want your face about 3 to 5 inches from it. If you are not speaking into the mic, which happens at least once per hearing, I'm going to interrupt you and politely remind you to please be sure to speak into the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here with Deputy Inspector General Yvonne Brooks, who heads all the administration as well as whistleblower. And I'm also here with the Executive Ethics Officer, the former, Jeff Hofstadler. So, without further ado, good morning, honorable committee and esteemed guests. The Office of the Inspector General, OIG, investigates allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse committed by employees, elected officials, and contractors of Baltimore City. This includes violations of criminal law, civil statutes, regulations, and ethical laws, as well as standards of conduct. The OIG then provides a comprehensive factual reports to agency heads or citizens when allowed by law. In March of this year, this same fiscal year 2023 budget proposal was presented in great detail to the OIG Advisory Board, with members Chairman Costello and Vice President Middleton participating. That board unanimously determined the proposed budget of $2.3 million with the one-time enhancement of $300,000 for ethics to be sufficient.
Madam IG, can you go back? You said that board did what?
That board unanimously determined the proposed budget of $2.3 million with the one-time enhancement of $300,000 for ethics to be sufficient. As outlined by law in Article 10, Section 4, that board then presented that budget, which they found to be, quote, provide sufficient funding to meet the duties of the office, unquote, to the Board of Estimates. Now the OIG is presenting the same budget to this committee. Now the highlights for fiscal year 22 include numerous investigative reports that the OIG completed, which included DPW, BSIT, Finance, Health, and other agencies, including both the Baltimore City Police Department and Fire Department. These reports and management alerts can be read online. Now, the new responsibilities imposed by laws for whistleblower rights and the ethics program continue to impact the OIG. There were 6 confidential whistleblower reports issued by the OIG this year. In ethics, the achievements included conducting the first ethical hearing in decades, publishing 8 advisory opinions, investigating over 10 ethics complaints, fining lobbyists who failed to file forms, and answering over 1,000 resolved helpline requests for just this year. Now, the OIG currently has 4 performance measures, with only 2 captured on the slide. The first is effectiveness, which is a number of criminal, civil, or administrative actions. Now, the numbers printed in the budget book are completely incorrect. They are now correct on this slide, and they soon will be online. For fiscal year 2021, the OIG completed 98 actionable items. However, the goal was 100, so the OIG fell 2 items shy of that target. The reality of fewer people at their work locations to retrieve documents and subpoenas, and the difficulty to bring people in for interviews has impacted ongoing complex investigations, which are now taking much longer. The second performance measure is the number of hotline complaints received. This number has stayed above 700 now for 3 years. Being responsive to all complainants is paramount. Even if the matter is outside the OIG jurisdiction, the OIG still tries to provide the proper resources for the citizens that call our hotline. Now, these hotline complaints are the basis of how the OIG investigations are developed. Number 3 is the number of outreach activities. The OIG is committed to increasing awareness as to who we are and what we do. Awareness greatly impacts the number of complaints. The OIG greets the new employees virtually every month at the new employee orientation, setting a foundation to work with integrity and ethics. I stress the importance of reporting fraud, waste, and abuse. The OIG furthers awareness by maintaining an active social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Finally, the OIG will be hosting a Citizens Academy in the fall, and we hope to have representation from all 14 districts. The final metric is the amount of money wasted or saved as a result of our investigations. The OIG hopes that identifying waste and savings encourages better fiscal management through new legislation or updated policies and procedures. During the OIG investigations, any financial issues identified can fall into the category of savings or waste. This metric, though, is contingent on the cases the OIG receives. Although the OIG has been very successful in this metric, it should not be considered the most important. This is demonstrated by the fact that ethics investigations may not have dollar amounts of value, but the value of an effective ethics program and ethical workers is immeasurable, as that is the basis for our good government. But for both fiscal year 21 and 22, the OIG met and surpassed the target identified savings of waste. Finally, the OIG budget is 91% dedicated to salaries and personnel costs, with the OIG holding 18 funded positions. The challenge of the OIG is being able to address all investigations on a timely matter with qualified investigators. Each of our agents carries 3 to 5 active cases. The office currently has over 30 active cases and a pending list of over 10 cases. This year, the OIG saved money by utilizing our own employees for all outreach materials, such as our OIG annual report, the Ethics Board annual report, as well as the training videos and all the presentations. It should be noted that even the OIG's furniture for our new ethics wing was surplus, and that the OIG acquired it for free from the federal government, and the OIG shared this cost-saving process to GGS so that other departments can use the same ability. Finally, the OIG did ask for a one-time enhancement of $300,000 to simplify the process for the 3,000 city employees that complete the financial disclosure forms. And so the ethics officer would not continue to get hundreds of complaints and questions every year. The ethics request, which represents less than a 0.015 of 1% of the city budget, was turned down based on incorrect information that the process was already being handled by BSIT. I spoke to Todd Carter, and he agreed that it is not, but there may have been a communication issue. So this one-time enhancement of $300,000 would directly impact the ease of completing these forms for city employees, including every member of this committee. We ask that this committee join the OIG in asking the mayor to find the funds elsewhere in this $2 billion budget for this important tool of accountability and transparency. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for this office.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Inspector General, for the work that you and your team are doing. Thank you also, Jeff, for the countless hours you spend answering complex questions. Certainly quite complex. A lot of things don't always make sense. But thank you for taking the time to explain rationale behind some things. I agree with what you're mentioning. And Jeff and I have had this conversation that the financial disclosure system needs a lot of work. It's not so simple to use. I'm a technology guy, and it's not so simple to use. It's not even clear. You can't really review even what you're doing to check. I mean, that's why, this is like the one part that I would even opt for paper over and I'm a technology guy through and through. I don't really even carry pens, but the system's really, it's just not designed correctly, and which will lead to, I'm sure, countless mistakes being made, being that you just can't see step by step. And and I have seen it improve over the years, and so thank you for that, where there's been some clarifications and notes added to it. But even with that, it needs to be, a more simple form system that you can see what you're doing and be able to reference back. And also wouldn't be a bad idea for it to also have, a copy of your previous year, so that, especially when it comes to board of directors or things like that, you got to think back, like, what boards are you on? Like, it's not always something that everybody remembers. And so just being able to reference back to previous years, that synagogue still has you on their board, or this, that school still has you on their board, and gives you the opportunity to fill that in. In addition to that, I know you mentioned there's already thousands of people in the system. Is there anybody or any group of people that you feel should be filling out financial disclosures that are not currently, that maybe the council could take legislative action to add them to that process?
Yes, we do. Jeff, I'll let you touch on this, but we've pretty much said that most employees should fill them out. It's also a big part of accountability and transparency for all the citizens to be able to see this as well. And that's what people don't realize, that this is a database that is available to all the citizens. And so it's very important. But I will let my former executive director answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman, for the question. And I'll also note, briefly touching on your earlier comments, yes, the reason for the enhancement is to improve precisely the aspects that you were speaking to, allowing the filers to import previous years so they can see what they've already filed, review the work as they go, and then also to improve the process for both viewers. The law requires the statements to be viewed, and for administrators to both be able to review the statements and to allow the data that's in that system to be used in a meaningful way, potentially across other data systems in the city, to both identify and prevent conflicts at like key decision points. So for all those reasons, we think the enhancement request is very important to improve that important system, and the lobbyist system as well. To the question of increasing financial disclosure filers, that's, it's a bit of a policy question, but I will also say that the ethics law currently breaks it down by agency and who within those agencies are required to file, which ends up becoming very difficult administratively. A lot of the agencies say all non-clerical employees, for instance, whereas other agencies don't, and I think that that's sort of been an accumulation of just changes over time. And so one suggestion that seems like it would be both for ease of administration and for what makes sense from a conflicts of interest perspective is to perhaps make all non-clerical employees across the city file financial disclosure statements. And that increased filing, though, would go hand in hand with an increased and improved financial filing disclosure system, because we wouldn't necessarily want to add more filers until we have a system that works and is easy for both filers, viewers, and the administrators.
Can you elaborate a little bit more when you say non-clerical? I mean, I know, like, within the city, so like the city council, for instance, we don't have any financial authority to really make purchases or deals on behalf of the city, whereas there are people who control hundreds of millions of dollars of city spending that I, as a council member who've been here for 6 years, one who likes to walk the hallways of all the different city buildings, along with my councilman over here, Councilman Dorsey, does the same thing also. There's a lot of people who spend a lot of money, a lot of city money, make a lot of decisions on behalf of the city financially, that we have no idea who they even are, whether it's procurement, whether it's purchasing. So can you just elaborate on what you mean by non-clerical? Like, are those folks who are actually making those decisions? Every decision we make is all televised, right? Yeah. Those people are making decisions. A lot of them seem to be, a little, it piques our curiosity when we see things a little strange. Are all those people filing today?
Not necessarily. So non-clerical is defined in the law. Well, I should say, clerical is defined in the law as anybody who has solely a janitorial or, well, they use clerical capacity. So it would basically be anyone who doesn't have any sort of degree of discretion or doing any sort of substantive work for the city. So we think it makes sense to require everyone who doesn't have that degree or has some degree of discretion, some degree of substantive work to file. There is a catch-all for sort of individuals involved in procurement, but the definition isn't necessarily as tight as it could be. And again, making an easier definition of who needs to file across the board would make sense.
So those folks in procurement, they are filing today, like the ones that are reviewing contracts and submitting recommendations to the Board of Estimates or to the comptroller or to the mayor or to the council president, to the Board of Estimates in general. Are those people all filing today?
They should be. They're on the list of required filers.
So is there, okay, so that's one piece to it. I mean, the other thing to it is obviously, full-time versus part-time. So people who are working part-time, obviously, this, in essence, the fact that they're part-time, you would assume that they would also have other employment. I mean, the council is still considered part-time. I mean, I don't think that that's the best way to go. I think it should be considered full-time, and I think that obviously there should be a meaningful salary, proportionate to the work that's being done, which is not happening, which is an issue for the labor commissioner. But these folks. So, are you saying that would it be easier to just say all full-time city employees have to file, and do it that way?
Well, again, I think the distinction between duties does make sense in some ways, making the cutoff between duties. Individuals involved in solely, janitorial work, et cetera, may not need to file based on sort of the level of discretion or non-discretion involved in their work. But that would be one aspect that I think we could look at, and I think I'd welcome being part of that conversation, just deciding what makes sense for expansion.
I think that would probably be the most fair. And
a little
equitable.
closer.
I think that would be the most fair and equitable as well. Where Yvonne and I came from at WMATA, everybody had to file them. And it just made it so much easier, because when we do investigations, many times that's one of the things we pull, and it doesn't exist for people that are much higher up than you would think. Engineers, people like that, they still didn't have to file them. So it's really a great area that I believe that should be looked into, and that we should all work together to try to make that the fairest for everybody here in the city.
Right, so is that something that you guys are working on now, that you would submit as an administration bill? A lot of times agencies, when they have a bill that they'd like to request, they have the bill drafted and then they submit it and it's an administration bill. Is that something you guys are considering doing?
We barely have the time after being through the financial disclosures, but we just barely hold our head above water. But I completely agree. If someone at your level has a meeting on this, we will be happy to participate. It's really difficult for us to actually partake in policy or anything like that, because it's not what we do. And
then my second question, I know I asked 5 already, but my second one, since we get 2 questions, is what about folks that are appointed to, like we just had, like the liquor board, for instance, it was here before you, or boards, commissions, quasi-city groups, like what is currently on the table, like who currently files and who's not filing that should be filing when it comes to those entities?
Yeah, so the liquor board is actually filing under state law at this point. So there's state financial disclosure filers, but the ethics law does list a number of boards and commissions who have required filers, and that's all in, I believe, subtitle 7 of Article 8. But again, it's worth having the conversation of how to perhaps simplify that to make possibly all city or quasi-city boards and commission members file, et cetera. Many of them are included as filers, though.
So like the BMZA, all members of the BMZA file?
Yes.
And what about like quasi-city agencies?
Well, for instance, BDC members file, and if the quasi-city agencies are listed in that subtitle 7, then they are required filers.
Okay. And quasi-city organizations?
If they're listed in Subtitle 7, yes.
Okay. If you don't mind just forwarding a copy of,
Yeah.
of just the list that you have.
Yep.
And then any recommendations that you have as to what entities, because I'm sure that Article 7 predates a lot of entities that exist today also. So just by generic form of, every time there's a changeover of administration, there's a changeover of priorities, as to be expected, and the changeover of, just want to make sure that we're not leaving out people that should be, because again, these folks are controlling a lot of taxpayer money, and so taxpayers should just be able to have this information available.
We'll forward that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Mr. Hofstadter, it looks like we're going to see you more often. The Law Department let us know that you're going to be joining the team to do bill reports, or something like that. So thank you very much for sticking with city government, and I'm glad that you'll be with us.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm excited for the new role in the law department, but am also happy to keep helping ethics and be some institutional memory during the transition and going forward.
Right, exactly. And so you're starting to search for a new executive director of the ethics board. That's such a huge responsibility, as you know. So thank you for that effort. So no, we look forward to seeing you. Madam Inspector General, you obviously are seeing increases in demand. Are you properly staffed? Do you need more people?
Well, right now, since they asked for the 3% cut, we tried very hard to maintain exactly what we have. Because of great people like Jeff who end up getting dream jobs, and actually my deputy of investigations also got a dream job. She's now the Inspector General of Oakland Police Department, yes, in California. Wow. And Jeff has always wanted that to work back in the law department. So it's hard. Right now we have, we're actually interviewing. We have 3 interviews today. We have that, but I think next year we will actually be coming forward with a request for additional people. Councilman Costello asked us that last year, and we told him last year that we'd probably be bringing forward a request for 2 people, but I think I am going to hold that off till next year just because of everything that's happened. There's been
Plus, it sounds like you wanted to prioritize the ethics filing form as well.
I did. I did. And that was very, very important to us. Because I agree with Councilman Schleifer. It was hard. I had to actually get the ethics officer to help me as well, and I keep all of them. And then there's members of the council that I know, it's taken everybody a very long time. So we don't need that type of stress. We all have enough. So
Right.
I really hope that's something that can go forward.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too, because then we can also see what we filed last year, and relevant information can be transferred, but other new information can be added a lot easier. That was always something that I wanted to see too. Is I want to make sure I'm doing this consistent with what I did last year also. So that would be
And correcting
super
is very difficult. If you try to correct something, you have to redo the entire form. So it was very difficult.
Right, no, I'm with you. And then you have and I don't know if this is incorrect, can I borrow this? So, okay, that's what I thought. Because in the book it says that the number of hotline complaints decreased, and I was like, I know that's wrong. So, because I know with advertising, you're actually probably getting an increase in hotlines and requests.
Yeah, the hotline, it truly is, every time we do an outreach program, we always notice a spike in the complaints to the hotline. So that's why sometimes when we're able to talk about reports, or when we issue certain reports, we always get a spike. So that's why the whole social media aspect is very important, because it's the easiest way for people to know what we do. And I believe when we first came, I could have stopped 1 in 20 people, and 1 person out of 20 would have known what an Office of Inspector General does. Now I'd like to believe that probably 7 out of 20, but my dream before I leave would be that 10 out of 20 would know that. So it's just a matter of letting people know that we will answer the questions you have. We will try to, if it's not something we can do, we'll set you in the right direction. Because I can tell you during the pandemic, we had a lot of people just saying we were the only ones answering the phone. So kudos to my staff for that one.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially with the problems we were having with Workday, that folks were coming to you as well, which may not have been a waste, fraud, and abuse thing. It was a mistake because there were some changes that needed to be happening, but I'm sure because they came to us too. So,
And if there's something that the Office of the Inspector General can't do, we do referrals. We do referrals to external organizations, and they have a time to get back to the OIG. So we really try to be very responsive to the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hello, Madam OIG.
How are you?
Hold on. I just wanted to ask you, can you explain the increase of the 300,000 you requested? What was that for? Didn't you?
Sure. I'm actually going to let Jeff talk about, because he has, can you please break down what the 300,000 is?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The 300,000 was pulled kind of as a middle point from 3 different estimates we received in the informational gathering stage from outside vendors to put together a new financial disclosure system and lobbyist reporting system. So, back when we were realizing that the current online financial disclosure system and lobbying system had a number of issues and had originally been designed only as stopgap measures, and we were looking at what would be needed to put new systems in place. We did the information gathering, and so that 300,000 is about the middle point of the estimates that we received.
Okay. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. First, I want to address that issue of the budget metrics being so messed up. How did they get messed up, and does BBMR agree or disagree that those are incorrect?
Those numbers are incorrect. The agency inputs them into a system called Scorecard when they do their budget proposals, so they were input incorrectly. They are incorrect, but they've been corrected on the slides.
Okay. It's just a clerical error? I mean, I'm asking, yeah, Isabel.
Oh, well, it was made us look pretty bad. So I knew there was a pretty big mistake. So yeah, I believe it was just a clerical error. Mr. Senemy and I have a good working relationship. Okay. I don't think in any way they tried to sabotage that.
They're just such particular numbers. 27,
oh, well, actually, I can explain that.
27, 47, 36, like those are very particular numbers to get wrong.
If you look in our annual report,
uh-huh.
We actually, because the metrics is composed of management alerts, referrals, ROI, all the different administrative things we do, but the number that we actually publish in our annual report, in order to be consistent, that was just reports and management alerts. So that's where those numbers came from. If you look on 2021 in our annual report, it said 36 reports. 2020 was 47. 2019 was 27. And
all right, so
they weren't random numbers.
Somebody put numbers for a different metric into here. This raises a question of like, why don't these metrics match up? Wouldn't it make sense for whatever metrics the annual report is using to be the ones that are going into the budget as well? Or additionally, can we get them added, or does it make sense?
Yeah, so our process, just kind of globally citywide, is we've gone through over many years and settled on measures with agencies. The process now is that if the agency wants to make a change, they submit it to us. We sit down with the agency and with somebody from the Office of Performance and Innovation and go over those measures and agree on changes. So if there's something that they'd like to fix, I mean, we offer that. We've offered that to them, that we can sit down and go over and see if something fits better. and update it. I generally try to avoid this is just my way of managing, but I try to avoid changes if I can all afford to, because then you start to break some of the historical trends, and then it's harder to see what has gone on over a longer period of time. But if there's something that just doesn't make sense anymore or just isn't relevant for whatever reason, we definitely would agree with the agency to make those changes.
And if you go back to 2022's budget numbers, they were the bigger numbers that I told you. The numbers of, if you go out and actually look in 2022's financial budget number, they use the correct numbers, 41, 99, 115. For some reason,
Yeah.
this is 2022's budget book. And then for some reason, just something happened.
Okay, so I get it. Some error happened. But my question at this point is, if the OIG is reporting these numbers as associated with some other metric, would you say management alerts? If the OIG is reporting that as a meaningful metric in its annual report, shouldn't we have those numbers in the budget book as well?
We're only allowed 4 numbers in the budget book. And
There are plenty of agencies that
really?
have way more than this.
Oh,
Okay, 5 per service in the budget, right? Yeah. So maybe we could get that added in here.
yeah, or I mean, we actually asked to change it to this number. Because we do the annual report comparing, I didn't want to compare apples and oranges. So what I will do in next year's annual report is add both metrics, so this won't happen again.
Okay. And so can we get both metrics in the budget as well?
Well, we'd have to go back. The problem is we completed 2023 with we didn't run that.
I mean, not for this year, for next year.
Right. If that's what you would like.
If there isn't a reason we shouldn't, and those numbers are both valuable, then they should both be in there.
But one number is a subset of the other.
Okay. I like subsets.
Okay, if we like subsets, we'll do it.
Councilman, is that a request?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to make that request to have that included in the FY24 budget.
Could you sit, I couldn't hear you. Could you speak into the mic?
Yes. For the FY24 budget, I'd like to see management alerts added as a metric under OIG Service 836.
Well, they actually are. What we're doing is we're going back and adding a line about just the different reports.
Yeah.
So what the top number has is it includes the referrals, which is a lot of what we do as well. So that number is included in the top number, and then the bottom number is the actual reports that go out to everybody.
Okay.
Okay. But
Let me ask-
we're going to include both.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Jeff, I want to ask you, is ethics verifying agencies and HR's compliance with the rules that went into effect last term on advertising of positions for hire? So in the last term, we passed a bunch of changes to ethics laws, one of which was a requirement that anytime a city position is listed for hiring, it has to indicate in the job listing whether or not that is a position where the employee would have to file a financial disclosure report, 1. 2, at the time of hiring of any employee who is required to file, the agency or their supervisor is required to have them sign a document acknowledging that they are required to file an annual financial disclosure. And 3, that has to be submitted to the ethics board. Is that happening, and is ethics proactively checking agencies' compliance with that?
When the ethics board responsibilities first transitioned to the OIG in 2020 and then early 2021, we did have conversations with Department of Human Resources reminding them of the obligations under the new provisions you mentioned, to both put on the recruitment side of things, put whether or not the position is required to file, and then we also formulated that notice of ethics requirements that contained all of the information to give to new employees. We sent it out to every agency and DHR, indicating that this needed to be given during onboarding. We also included that form for inclusion in the new employee orientation, where they could download it and sign there. And we since then have been following up on the recruitment side of things. I don't believe that has taken effect yet, regardless of the fact that we do keep mentioning it. We don't control the recruitment side of things, and I think there has been some thought that once it's more integrated in Workday, that will be easier, but I can't speak to where DHR may or may not be on that process. We're much more pleased on the notice of ethics requirement side of things for new employees, and in fact, have made an online form that is now supposed to be given by agencies to every new employee coming in, and we're receiving a lot more of those. So more work can be done to verify that, but we're not the entity that gets lists of new employees, et cetera. So in some ways, we're dependent on what the agencies are reporting back out to us. But we're certainly trying to make it as easy as possible, including by giving them an online form.
So are you getting questions prior to these changes made last term? It was common, anticipated that every year the ethics staff would get numerous, if not countless, calls from existing city employees or managers at various levels within agencies asking, am I required to file, or is such and such an employee required to file? Are you still getting calls of that sort regarding existing current city employees?
Not near as many as there was before the transition. Our ethics officer has done a wonderful job in actually getting up-to-date lists and working with each agency who is required under that subtitle 7, getting up-to-date lists of the employees who are required to file, and then making sure that those employees end up filing. So the filing rate last year was, I think, 99% of required filers filed close to, if not on time, which hadn't even really been tracked before. So we at least have up-to-date spreadsheets and lists. We're hoping that gets a lot easier once Workday is fully rolled out for some of that functionality. But at least on that front, we're quite confident that most people who are required to file are at least being notified and are filing.
Dang, that's a pretty good rate, 99. Last question on that. When would you say the last time you sent any written communication to HR about the notice for posting job listings?
I think that was probably just about 2 months ago. We sent sort of we've been working with some contacts in the Workday team who were told that we should contact in order to get the functionalities we wanted, because we were even exploring having sort of a link to fill out the financial disclosure statement as a task on individual employees' Workday accounts. So we sent everything that from the ethics side of things would need to be integrated onto a Workday user's platform, and they sort of are taking it, I suppose, under advisement at this point. So that was a couple of months ago.
But specifically for to address, hey, HR, every position that is listed for hiring has to have a line or something that indicates yes or no, financial disclosure required. When was the last time you communicated that? That was
part of the email, and included members of the DHR team. Directly to the head of DHR, it's been longer ago than that. I can follow up with you. I'm not entirely sure when that last was.
Okay, then I'll just make a request now then. I'd like to have forwarded to me the last 3 communications about this issue?
We can do that.
Got that, everybody? Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Any, I'd like to recognize Councilman Bullock, member of the committee. Councilman?
Can I ask one last thing here? I appreciate it. Can we just, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, real clear about the role of the advisory board as it pertains to the budget. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that the advisory board's role with regard to the budget of the OIG is to...
Is that a request, Councilman?
No. I want to articulate this so I know that I've made a real clear, accurate statement here. The role of the advisory board as it pertains to the OIG's budget is to determine that they believe that the amount being requested essentially of the Board of Estimates, the amount being requested by the office for inclusion in BBMR's development of the proposed budget to the Board of Estimates, that amount is adequate to meet the needs of the office. It's not whether or not the amount in the budget book is adequate. It's to determine whether or not the amount that the agency is asking of BBMR for inclusion in the book is adequate to meet the duties and responsibilities of the office. Are we clear about that? Is that?
Well, I actually took the language that the advisory board sent to the Board of Estimates, which is quoting the law of Article 10 as to what the responsibility is to present whether the budget is sufficient.
Sufficient.
That's the law.
Yeah.
So,
Originally, if you go back on this law, there was originally that they were trying to keep politics out of the Office of the Inspector General. They originally brought it up that we would have their own budget line, so that the Office of the Inspector General, like they do in New Orleans. In New Orleans, they have a dedicated line to the Inspector General, so they don't have to present in front of the legislature, and that's what other Inspector Generals have. When the law was being formed, because I read through all the transitions of what it came. Originally, it was supposed to be, I believe, 10 times the salary of the mayor, and then it progressed from that through the processes. But the law actually says that the advisory board's responsibilities are to do the performance of the Inspector General and to review the budget, and we have to present that to them, and then they are the ones that present that to the Board of Estimates. So I just quoted the language that was used in the law that they used, and you can actually see it if you go to the OIG website. You can actually read their letter because it's right under advisory board. We try to make everything as transparent as possible.
That letter is posted on the OIG's website?
Oh, yes. If you go under the OIG's website, you'll see like balloons up top. One of the balloons says advisory board, and under advisory board it actually has the law, which is Article 10. It has all correspondence that we dealt with the advisory board, as well as my performance review, as well as their letter to the Board of Estimates, which was an email, which actually Chairman Costello and Vice President Middleton were CC'd on. But it's public. I post everything.
All right, I'm going to, thank you.
Okay.
I want to read a couple of things. I may have to come back to this. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Bullock, you have any questions?
Not at this point, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's no additional questions, so, Madam OIG, thank you and your staff for coming before this committee to, explain your budget items and those questions that the council committee actually asked. So we're gonna recess
Oh,
to 11.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I assumed that other people would have questions and that I would have just a couple minutes.
Well, okay, well, we got 11:30, so you got one more question, Councilman?
Yeah, can I have just 1 minute to just read something real
Sure.
quick before we recess, and then I'll ask a question? Thank you. You're welcome to go, Councilman Schleifer, if you'd like. Sure. I'd be glad to read it out loud, Councilman. The advisory board shall, by an affirmative vote of at least 4 of its members, either approve the proposed budget as submitted or revise the proposed budget if the advisory board disagrees with the substance of any item contained in the proposed budget, including estimates of need and amounts of requested funding. Submission. The budget approved by the advisory board pursuant to subsection B of this section shall be the office budget of the advisory board recommends to the Board of Estimates. The advisory board, on behalf of the Office of the Inspector General, shall submit the recommended budget to the Board of Estimates in a timely manner in order for the recommended budget to be considered for inclusion in the ordinance of estimates. There's some imprecision in this, and I realize I am the person who wrote this myself. There is some imprecision in this in that it says that the board makes the recommendation to the Board of Estimates, sort of bypassing the essential, indispensable intermediary of the Budget Bureau. Am I off track here, Bob? I mean, more functionally, the way this would work is the advisory board would be the one responding to BBMR asking for each agency's budget request for the year. Am I off track, Bob? And so that would be the advisory board determining whether or not what is being asked of BBMR for inclusion in the budget is adequate, because that's the point at which.
Council, is that a question or is that a request for
I think
Bob?
the law says specifically it
hang
goes
on,
to the Board of
excuse me.
Estimates.
Excuse me. In effect, is that what is happening, or is that how we are interpreting this?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking Bob. Sorry.
So what I hear there is that the advisory board reports to the Board of Estimates on the sufficiency of what was presented. But the Board of Estimates still has the authority to submit the ordinance, which is, of course, our process. You know, the budget process as a whole that goes through is guided by us. So, I mean, I would say I would prefer to see that information a lot earlier in the process, because, you know, this year in particular, when it went, we were almost wrapping up our budget process. Now, we knew that they did submit an enhancement request, you know, early on in the process, so it was looked at and reviewed. But if I'm right on the timing, I think the advisory report to the Board of Estimates, I don't think it came until pretty late in the process, if I remember. It might have been April or.
Nope, it came on March.
March.
It came in March because we had to present in front of the advisory board, and they sent the email the next day.
Yeah, so in March, for our process, in March, we're putting together the
Yeah,
preliminary
March
budget
is like the
publication.
11th and a half hour.
Oh, yeah, it's the 11th hour and the 59th minute, frankly, because all the decisions at that point, in terms of the administration making decisions on inclusion of things in the budget, those are usually wrapped up by the end of February, early March, and then we have basically like a 3-week window to put together the first book that goes out to the public, which is this is, you know, these are 300-page, 400-page documents. We have about 3 weeks to put that together. So by the time this year, at least, that advisory board recommendation was made, for whatever it's worth, we were kind of past, I would say. It wasn't off the table completely, but we were, again, at the 11th hour and the 59th minute, getting ready to put the preliminary budget out to the public.
Okay, so let me speak to the actual
Councilman,
intention.
when you, hope this, because we gotta wrap this up, but we got another
I know, we
hearing
have
at
11:30.
11:30, so. it
But
makes
just
this-
for a matter of clarification, the Office of the Inspector General did turn in that to the advisory board in January.
Okay, still, January is too late.
We
The
have to do
inten-
our budget.
Excuse me, the intention here, and I'm sure that if we went back and looked at hearings on the OIG charter amendment and records of conversations, it would make clear. The intention here is that the advisory board should be meeting sometime in the range of September, October each year, because that's the time at which budget submissions really need to be made to BBMR to give them the full value of consideration in balance with everything else in the budget. And so I'm asking that the advisory board, do we have anybody from law here? Because
So,
the board is.
Councilman, we're gonna have to wrap this up.
I'm gonna
So
ask this
If you got a
one request here
you can get
that-
your request to, Marguerite, because we gotta move on, we have another hearing coming up.
I'm going
you're gonna have
to
to
make a
wrap it up,
request.
sir.
I'm making a formal request here, and then
Okay.
I'm done. Is that that there be some communication, let's say by the end of August, that in order to convene the advisory board to perform its duties in the range of September or October of this year, in order to be able to submit a request to BBMR no later than November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this hearing has been recessed until 11:30, which we will be bringing in the convention center. Thank you.